Let's get the latest from Beijing on this. Our China correspondent Yana Li joins me now. Yana, we have that statement from the Ukrainian side today suggesting this call appears to have gone pretty well from their end. What are you hearing from the Chinese government?
Well, from the Chinese side, their write-up of that phone call between the two leaders says, I quote, "With rational thinking on the rise, it is important to seize the opportunity and build up favorable conditions for the political settlement of the crisis." Once again, President Xi Jinping trying to play a mediator there. The Chinese leader also announced that he will be sending a special representative on Eurasian affairs to Ukraine. And meanwhile, President Zelensky wrote that a new Ukrainian ambassador is on his or her way to Beijing. Now, it is important to contextualize this conversation. It comes 1 month after President Xi visited Moscow, 2 months since the 12-point position paper published by Beijing, and 14 months after the Russian invasion. You'll also note that on the Chinese side, they call it the Ukrainian crisis and not the Ukrainian war and not Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So Beijing is clearly not a neutral player in all of this, but it still wants to be a global peacemaker. The official line is all about how much China is a respectful UN Security Council sitting country, a responsible major state, and it does everything it does, I quote, is above board. So far, there's been a lot of skepticism from Kyiv and some of its allies. And no doubt last week's gaffe from a sitting Chinese ambassador didn't help. He questioned the sovereignty of post-Soviet states. So we'll have to wait and see if the new envoys can achieve something concrete or if, once again, this is all talk and no concrete action.
And Yana, as you suggest, this call today comes as China is trying to position itself as something of a mediator between Ukraine and Russia. It's even proposed a sort of peace plan of its own, a roadmap out of the war. What can you tell us about that idea from the Chinese government?
Well, that so-called peace plan, it's actually a 12-point position paper on the war in Ukraine. It mentioned lots of things we had actually heard before from the government in Beijing. Things like a nuclear war should be avoided, food security should be protected, and that sovereignty and territorial integrity should also be respected. And that last point I just mentioned is a really interesting one because it is one of the cornerstones of China's foreign policy. It really hates other countries meddling in what it sees as its domestic affairs when it comes to Taiwan, Tibet, Hong Kong, and other regions here. So the fact that Russia, under Xi Jinping's great friend Vladimir Putin, has invaded a UN-recognized country, a state with whom China had very good relations with in the past, is rather an awkward situation for Beijing indeed. And this is the corner Beijing has backed itself into and is now somehow trying to get out of whilst maintaining that close relationship with Moscow. So it's, of course, up to the Ukrainian side to decide if Beijing has that leverage it seeks over Moscow. The danger is, of course, achieving not much for Ukrainians, not much of the kind of peace Ukrainians want, whilst giving Beijing legitimacy on the international scene.
Yana Li in Beijing. Thank you.